exactly how he can do that. First, let me bring in Senator Mark Udall, Democrat from Colorado. He was just in a special briefing given by the CIA director. He serves on the Intelligence Committee. Senator, good evening. Great to have you here.
Cenk, thanks for having me on.
All right. How much can you tell us about that CIA briefing that you just had?
I sit on the Intelligence Committee, and I have to, as well as the Armed Services Committee, I have to be careful about what I say. But I would tell you that we're hearing more of the details, but the general theme and narrative that the general public now has is holding fast. I anticipate that there will be more of this information released. The American public and the world can better understand the courage and the bravery of the men and women who conducted this mission. I think you'll also get greater appreciation for the courage that the president showed in assuming that this was the right kind of mission and going ahead of approving this kind of an assault rather than bombing the compound or using missiles, which would have left us with very little information and very little clarity about whether bin Laden was actually in this compound in Pakistan.
Well, actually, we're just learning from NBC News that we've got 10 hard drives, 5 computers, 100 storage devices like disks and thumb drives, which is a little surprising that they had that much communication there, meaning that they perhaps were very active in planning operations. We'll obviously find out a lot more about that as we go through that material. But as you say, that seems to be an excellent reason to have not bombed but gone in with these special forces instead. Does the intelligence community and the administration feel vindicated by that?
Yes, and this was a high-risk operation. It would have been much easier to lob a few big bombs in there. There would have been collateral damage, to use the euphemistic term that you're well aware of, which would have meant a lot of women, children, and men and women who were in the neighborhood would have been killed, and we wouldn't have been able to confirm that bin Laden was actually on the site. We had a lot of circumstantial evidence, but until that force went in there, we weren't actually able to identify the individual as bin Laden. So this was a very, very important way in which to undertake this operation.
Yeah, you know, from what I read, they are saying, I think Panetta was saying that we had about 60 to 80% certainty that bin Laden was in the compound. That means that there was some degree of lack of certainty that it was not him. So, of course, that means the Navy team going in there would appear to be the better way to go. But, you know, you also mentioned the intelligence, Senator, and I want to talk to you about that. The Associated Press has this quote that I want to share with you and then ask you about it since you know more. They said, in a secret CIA prison in Eastern Europe years ago, Al-Qaeda's #3 leader, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, gave authorities the nicknames of several bin Laden couriers. Four former U.S. intelligence officials said, it's a lot of intelligence officials to agree on that, Mohammed did not reveal the names while being subjected to simulated drowning technique known as waterboarding. So is that right? This had nothing to do with waterboarding, that he actually gave the information in a totally separate interrogation?
I don't want to disappoint you, but as a member of the Intelligence Committee, I have to be very careful what I can say about this matter. I would tell you, though, more broadly, that I've learned, you've learned, the public has learned that we've generated almost all the information that's been actionable and useful through what would be called civilized interrogation techniques, by befriending the individual, by treating the individual respectfully versus using torture techniques such as waterboarding. History shows us that we not only can keep faith with our values and our Constitution, but we can also generate the best kind of intelligence by treating people in a way that comports with the Geneva Convention, not violates the Geneva Convention.
And I think the second point is really important there. We actually want to get better information. This is how you get better information. We've proven that over and over in our history. Senator Udall, if you'll stand by for just one moment, I also want to bring in NBC News terrorism analyst Roger Cressy, who joins us by phone. Roger, I want to play a clip from Jay Carney this afternoon talking about whether Obama resisted or did not resist, and then get your thoughts on it. Let's watch first.
Bin Laden's wife rushed the U.S. assaulter and was shot in the leg but not killed. Bin Laden was then shot and killed. He was not armed.
He didn't. If you didn't have his hand on a gun, how was he resisting?
Yeah, the information I have to you, first of all, I think resistance does not require a firearm.
Did he have any weapon?
He was not armed, is what I understand to be true.
All right. Roger, any clarity on that? What does it mean that bin Laden resisted if he didn't have a firearm?
Well, I think what it means, Cenk, is that he didn't just lie down and surrender. He didn't go prostrate on the ground. And in the heat of the moment, as the SEAL team is assessing a hostile situation, they got to make a very quick judgment. So, you know, there may be more details. I mean, as the debriefs continue with the SEAL team and others involved in the operation, we're going to hear more details emerging. But the bottom line is, the men in that position felt it was the right course of action, and we really can't be in a position to disagree with it.
All right. We are just getting from NBC News that the photo of bin Laden apparently will be released. We're not sure when. What was the decision-making behind that, Roger?
Well, I had talked to members of the administration most recently, and they said it was still being hashed out on the pros and cons. I mean, the pros are pretty obvious. It is proof of death. It's demonstrating to the world that there's visual evidence of bin Laden's demise. The con, of course, is that those in the radical community will use that to perpetuate the martyr myth. Will use it as a cause celeb. So ultimately, the White House decided the pros outweigh the cons, and creating that proof of death visual was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think at some point they had to release it. There's no other way. Otherwise, the conspiracy theorists would go nuts. And look,
that's exactly right.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Senator Udall, I want to talk about the implications of all of this. And now that we have this information, now that we've taken this action, let's talk about implications for Gitmo, Afghanistan, Pakistan. First, let's start with Pakistan. It appears that, boy, either they knew or should have known that bin Laden was right underneath their nose.
Yeah, let me put it this way. They're either incompetent or they're in cahoots. And Pakistan is an important country in an important part of the world, 180 Muslims. They have nuclear weapons. But we need to reset our relationship with Pakistan. They need to be forthcoming. There needs to be transparency. We're investing $3 billion a year in Pakistan. And at this point in our relationship, if we can't be honest with each other, if we can't share information in a frank and transparent way, we're headed for some more trouble here. I am optimistic in this regard. I think that there is an opening in Afghanistan now, but I want to make it clear that there's still a lot of work to be done. We did cut off the head of the snake. There's enormous symbolic value in what happened, but there may also be operational ramifications because of what you pointed out earlier with all the computers and all the information, all the connections that seemingly were at this compound. There may be utility there as well. But let me just say again on Pakistan, there has to be a series of very frank discussions. I'm going to be asking tough questions both in the public view and the Armed Services Committee and in the secured and confidential hearings that we'll have in the Intelligence Committee about Pakistan's behavior.
Senator, how about the idea of saying, hey, you know what, we went into Afghanistan to get bin Laden and al-Qaeda. Panetta has said before that there's hardly any al-Qaeda left. Now there's no bin Laden left. Is it time to transition out of Afghanistan, and is it time to transition out of Gitmo?
I support the president's overall strategy in Afghanistan. As you know, we're reaching a crossroads this summer when we're going to begin to draw down our troops. I think the timing is important here. We did go into Afghanistan to get this individual. He had particular ties to the Taliban and Mullah Omar. The credo, the culture of Pashtunwali, where a visitor is your friend and you defend that person to the end of your life as well, played a role here. But there is an opening to look again at our relationship in Afghanistan and begin to hand off the responsibility there. In the end, the exit ramp in Afghanistan is tied to a political settlement where the Taliban and their supporters come into the government with the Karzai supporters, the Tajiks in the north, the other peoples that make up the country of Afghanistan.
All right, Colorado Senator Mark Udall and NBC terror analyst Roger Cressy, thank you both so much for your time tonight.
Cenk, thanks for having me on.
All right.